Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to All Things Division 3 Soccer with Simple Coach and Jackie. I am Simple Coach, and that there is Jackie. Yeah, she's living large. Hey, this is a second episode of my new show, Injured Time. I just cover topics that may or may not talk about Division 3, but somehow are related to soccer. So I have opinions about other things, not just Division 3 soccer. So figured I would capture them somehow. And today, I'm going to be talking about high school soccer. So I did a poll on anti-social media where I had the masses vote on what was the what subject they wanted me to talk about, and high school soccer won out. So I, like any good leader, I follow the masses. So I am following along, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about high school soccer. It's probably just a good idea to start to talk about how we got to this point where it is verboten for some players in the, I'll just call it academy system, but it's MLSNext. However you want to call it. I'll probably use those terms interchangeably. And who knows, maybe next year the name changes, right? I mean, that's the way things go around here. So, truth be told, it started on the boys' side. So when U.S. Soccer launched the Development Academy in 2007, there was no such mandate, but it was left to the clubs to prohibit their players from participating in high school soccer. In 2012, the DA introduced the 10-month DA season and banned high school play outright. And I think it was probably, they have their own rationale and reasons for it. But, ultimately what was the goal? The idea was that we wanted our best players to participate in a more competitive environment. And the notion was that the only way that could be more competitive is if the DA Academy, you just played within the DA Academy if you were on such a team. Jurgen Klinsmann at the time, who I think was one of the main drivers for all of this sort of structure, was quoted at the time saying, "If we want our players to someday compete against the best in the world, it is critical for their development that they train and play as much as possible and in the right environment." Klinsmann, I think, grew up in his whole career was pretty much from 10 years old on was part of whatever professional club system there was. So he doesn't, I would argue that he doesn't have that experience of playing in various environments. He was, right, from an early time period, he was basically focused in on, the path to become a professional soccer player. A great one at that. But so, up until 2012, it was up to the clubs. In 2012, U.S. Soccer said, if you're going to participate in the DA, you're not allowed to play high school soccer. And unless, of course, hey, hang on a second. Unless, of course, you went to a private school and you could prove that you were either receiving a scholarship or your acceptance to that private school was contingent upon you playing soccer, then you were allowed to play, which is ironic, right? Because what do we talk about all the time is that the opportunity for players to play soccer, because of pay to play. And here we are handing a golden ticket to players just because they happen to go to private school. I mean, that, right? So talk about gentrifying the sport, talk about unequal treatment, and I'll be quite honest with you. For me, it's just completely intellectually corrupt, right? Like you either allow it or you don't allow it, and you don't start picking and choosing based on, you know, what you think is are better environments for players to play in, like private schools. I just think that this was pushback that they could somewhat justify. So, all right. So, what was the net result? When they tried it on the girls' side, all the girls' teams said, "Heck with this. We want to play high school. We want to do all this stuff." And so, all these great academy or these great girl GA teams turned to ECNL and made the ECNL the top girls platform league, whatever we call it these days, out there. Some great quality teams. They still play high school, given that opportunity. And I would argue, all things being equal, I think that for a host of reasons, which I'll talk about, I think the girls' game is ahead of the boys' game in terms of creativity and how they play and whatnot. But that's for another time. All right, so this is about high school soccer. So just sort of give you that primer. I'm going to save my comments for the next vote of the masses on MLSNext or whatever that league is. And, because I think by and large, if you look at why it was set up and you look at the net result, I'm going to argue it's a failure. Like I don't think we've sort of made these leaps and bounds in terms of quality of players. And in fact, I think we've created a mass of robots that there is not that diversity of players that I thought it would, or they thought it would create. All right, so let me start out by telling you my biases, just so I can get these out of the way, so that if you decide to call me names because of these opinions, then you could go ahead and do it and at least have, some facts on your side. So, obviously I played high school soccer, right? So I played in Spain for 2 years, and then I played for two different high schools in the U.S. And in Spain, it was city champs for 2 years in a row, and then lost in the American Schools of Europe tournament. And I think it was the semis against the American School of Madrid on a goal that during a game that it was probably more appropriate to fly kites than it was to play soccer. And I remember that seared into my mind. And then, like I said, I came back to the States and played high school soccer here for two different schools. This is all before the nonsense started to happen. And then just most recently in the last, I think it's 7 years, I can't remember, I'm a volunteer assistant for my local high school. So I'm one of the assistant coaches on staff that during the high school season. So, I've seen pretty much the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of ugly, but there's a lot of good, right? Character forming. So if it's not clear by now, let me state you my position. I find it utterly absurd that players are forbidden from playing in high school soccer. Let me say it again. I find it utterly absurd that players are not allowed to play high school soccer. And I'm going to outline a bunch of reasons for it. And I'm going to suggest something that is probably a little bit sacrilegious, maybe contrarian, whatever you want to call it. But I would argue playing high school soccer makes you a more complete soccer player. You heard me, right? I think it makes for a more complete, rounded soccer player than the sanitized MLSNext structure. Now, am I suggesting that high school soccer is better than academy soccer? Absolutely not. Like I said, sometimes it's downright ugly, but that's the point, right? The point isn't to give kids easy games or games that are going to all look the same. It's to give them tough games, difficult games that pose a whole set of different challenges. Or at least that's what I thought, right? That's what I thought about soccer. And truth be told, right? These are young men and women, mostly men, that we're responsible for molding in some sort of way. And it's not just to become soccer players. It's about becoming young men and women that'll go out into the world, right? Right, like, where does that happen? Happens in the house, right? So your household, but then it also happens in school, right? Your teachers, your peers, these are all factors that mold you into, and it's your coaches that mold you into that person. All right, but I just try to go back and forth. Let's talk about the soccer. And I would say ultimately high school soccer probably mimics college soccer more than academy soccer ever will. So, my first point is, right, game variability, right? More than likely in a high school season, you're going to see teams of a variety of skills, of a variety of styles, that as a player, you're going to have to figure out. You're going to play teams that just throttle you and try to beat you silly, to teams that may try to play, to, Route 1 teams, so a whole set of different circumstances. And ultimately, I think as an individual player, it becomes a creative cauldron for these players trying to figure out how to play. And, and I'll talk about it, there's pride on the line. They're going to do things differently. They might be relied upon by their coaches to sort of carry the team. These are all good things. And you know what? They might deal with coaches who know or don't know so much about the game. And so they're going to have to fill in the gaps where appropriate. And to that point, they're going to face, in high school soccer, you face a variety of different players. You're going to face players of different skill levels, different physical attributes that are going to force you to adapt to the game circumstances. I think probably the most interesting thing that we don't talk about is that you're not bound by the dictates of age groups, right? You're a freshman and you're good enough and you play. You're going to be dealing with a senior who is probably a foot taller and has been working out in the gym for 2 years. That's a big difference that you're going to have to figure out how to play against. And, when you're in the academy, that's taken care of for you. You're going to play against your peers, your age group peers. And I would argue not only that, but you're probably playing against those peers in an age group that were born earlier in the year. Right, the conundrum, right, that we experience in all sports, where, if you pick a January kid versus a December kid, more than likely realistically, the January kid has 12 months advantage in physical development, over a December kid. But we don't talk about that. Probably the other thing now is you're playing for something bigger, whether you realize it or not. You represent something special, and there's probably nothing more special than your school or your community that you just don't, no matter what MLS or whatever academy system tries, it can't be mimicked. And I would argue playing for Super Elite Academy, ACFC, whatever, there's very little pride in that. right? Because why? You're invested in it for 90 minutes of practice or 90 minutes a game. It doesn't permeate in what you do. I'd, I'd also argue that, again, depending on the player and the circumstances, you're given a degree of creativity and freedom that you will never get at an academy system where, again, I talk about creating a generation of robots. I think that's accurate, right? Like you're molded into playing into specific way, where I think at the high school level you're given a little bit more freedom, you're allowed to express yourself a little bit more under the circumstances that the game allows you to. I think there's a natural chaos to high school soccer that allows that gives players the permission to sort of go out there and try different things that, again, you're not going to experience so much without getting yanked, maybe. You get subbed out because you try it in an academy game. In a high school game, you might not be able to, coaches might not be able to risk taking you off the field. And I think that might be a good thing, right? Like, am I off? I think probably we talk about this, and I think it's a little bit generic in the academy system, but we talk about creating leaders, right? Like, you know, in a high school setting, high school soccer setting, you're going to develop real leadership skills, right? Over time, right? As a freshman, you're going to follow just you're going to follow the seniors who are expected to lead. And over time, from freshman to sophomore, to junior year to your senior year, the expectation that players are going to be looking up to you grows. In the academy system, I think you default to the captains, but ultimately, real leadership is on the coaches, right? Because the coaches drive so much of who plays, how do you play, and those decisions that really in an academy system, you really don't grow necessarily as a leader. And I would argue, too, that from, year in and year out, more than likely captains are settled upon and they're the same players over and over again. And how do you develop if you're not one of those captains or into a leader? And I think that only happens at the high school game. Another big one that I've thought about is just on the whole notion of accountability. You're not accountable in an academy, and I don't mean so much on the field. You get yanked, right? You get subbed, whatever. That to me is not accountability. Accountability is walking down the hallways, and and your coaches, your teachers, your friends, right? They watch your games. They hear about it. They're commenting. They're joking about bad results or being embarrassed or being, on the field or, scoring a goal. And ultimately they're excited to come see you play. And that doesn't happen at the academy, obviously. And as a result, what happens? You end up playing these games full of emotion, right? Whether it's a school rivalry or you have, the school sponsors a whiteout or a blackout, like kids dress all in white or black and they're all in the stands, and you're your close friends and they're yelling your name and they're doing all this stuff. You don't see that in the academy. Not at all. What you see are the parents on the sideline and then obviously coaches. I mean, and I'm sorry about that. I wish I could say like, oh, these academy games are going to draw 1,000 people that I know high school games will draw, right? And I know of some schools that have 2,000 kids surround the fields during specific rivalries. Like, you don't, if Super Academy Elite FC plays Great Academy Elite SC and they're close rivals. You get your parents, and you get maybe some coaches. Like, that's as exciting as it gets. And then ultimately, right, like these lead to the memories. I always say, like, what games do I remember most? Well, they're my high school and my collegiate games, not so much the club games. I made great friends in my club, but I remember those memories more than I do the club soccer that really didn't, like I said, didn't matter a whole lot. So, you're going to remember playing, like I said, but you're one of these teams that gets 1,000 people out to watch and cheer on. You're going to remember that and missing a penalty or scoring a penalty or scoring a goal over, on a Saturday, driving 4 hours to play the, other double secret elite academy. And then whatever happens, that nobody's really there, and then you drive home. You're gonna remember that? I don't know. I don't think so. You'll remember the agony and the ecstasy of the games in high school more for years and years and years and years to come, as if this stuff happened yesterday. And I think it's sad that they take that away from academy kids. I mentioned this earlier, right? I think the high school, whether you agree or not, I think playing high school soccer will create a much more well-rounded player. All of these elements contribute to who a player becomes. And I think that from leadership to playing with emotion and pride and all these different things, and circumstances that might change day to day, week to week, I think that creates a much more rounded player than, when all of these challenges and emotion and difficulties are removed from the vanilla academy MLSNext. And again, I just go, why do I think I call academy players largely that I see robots? I'm not saying that they're not good, but I just think they sort of get into this rote routine of doing the same things over and over and over again. And I don't necessarily think that's good. I don't think that that's by design what we're trying to do. And then lastly, let me just say, when has it been bad to play? Right? When has it been bad to play in different circumstances? Back before all this nonsense, the main thrust that players were told is play as much as you can, right? Play whenever and wherever. I used to say, you called me, you told me there was a game, and I didn't care how far it was, I was going to play, right? And you never knew. It could be an all-dirt field that I would be playing on at Farcher's Grove, or in a park that was literally surrounded 4 deep with screaming fans in yelling in different languages, on a park field that, ankle breaker field, but you played with an intensity, and whether it was a Guatemalan league or you were playing for, I just joked, I played for the Peruvian national team at one point, like, right? You're playing in these different circumstances that change the game up and give you a different flavor. And that's all been removed for a generation of soccer players that play in the academy. And I just think it's unfortunate. So, to wrap it up, as I said earlier, to me, if we're trying to create and build these soccer players, there is no reason to justify prohibiting players from playing high school soccer. Unless, of course, you have other motives. And, which I think I'll save for another episode of Injured Time. So with that, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Put some comments below. Shoot me an email if you agree, disagree. I'm sure Jackie will read them. He's still there, undisturbed. And yeah, I'll put out another poll for the next episode of Injured Time and see where we go. But definitely one on the dockets is taking a look at the academy system. So thanks again. Have a great day.